What if I told you that a single piece of paper signed over 240 years ago not only created a new nation but also lit a fire for freedom that spread across the entire globe? It sounds like the plot of a blockbuster movie, but it's the real story of the American Revolution. So picture this. It's the mid-18th century. America isn't the United States we know today. It's 13 separate colonies, scattered along the Atlantic coast, all under the rule of the mighty British Empire. Life for many colonists was pretty good. They had more land, more opportunities, and in many ways more freedom than their counterparts back in England. They were British subjects, sure, but they were also developing their own unique identity, a rugged independent spirit forged on the frontier. But then, things started to change. Back in Britain, the government was swimming in debt, largely thanks to the hugely expensive 7 Years' War, which ironically they fought partly to protect the American colonies from the French. To pay off this mountain of debt, Parliament in London looked across the Atlantic and thought, hey, those colonies are doing pretty well. Let's have them chip in. This led to a series of acts and taxes that really rubbed the colonists the wrong way. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the principle. First came the Sugar Act, then the Stamp Act in 1765. This one was a real lightning rod. It required colonists to pay a tax on almost every piece of printed paper they used. Legal documents, newspapers, even playing cards. Imagine being taxed by a government thousands of miles away, where you have no elected officials to speak for you. The colonists were furious. Their rallying cry became, "No taxation without representation." This wasn't a new idea, but it was now the central point of contention. They argued that as British citizens they had rights, and one of those rights was to be taxed only by their own elected assemblies. Protests erupted. Groups like the Sons of Liberty formed, organizing boycotts of British goods. The pressure worked, and Parliament repealed the Stamp Act. But they didn't back down. Instead, they passed the Declaratory Act, basically saying, "We repealed the tax, but just so you know, we still have the power to make laws for you in all cases whatsoever." It was a classic, "we're still the boss" move. Then came the Townshend Acts, taxing things like glass, lead, paint, and tea. More protests, more boycotts. Tensions were escalating, and you could feel the electricity in the air. In 1770, this tension exploded into violence in the Boston Massacre. British soldiers, taunted by a crowd, fired into the mob, killing 5 colonists. Propaganda, like Paul Revere's famous engraving of the event, spread like wildfire, painting the British as brutal tyrants. The pot was simmering, but the event that made it boil over was the Boston Tea Party in 1773. To help the struggling British East India Company, Parliament passed the Tea Act. It actually made tea cheaper for the colonists, but it also gave the British company a monopoly and was seen as another trick to get the colonists to accept Parliament's right to tax them. So one cold December night, a group of colonists, disguised as Native Americans, boarded 3 British ships in Boston Harbor and dumped 342 chests of tea into the water. It was a bold, defiant act of protest. Britain's response was swift and harsh. They passed a series of laws the colonists called the Intolerable Acts. They closed Boston Harbor until the tea was paid for, shut down the Massachusetts government, and allowed British officials accused of crimes to be tried in England. This was the final straw. The other colonies, seeing what happened to Massachusetts, realized they could be next. It was a classic case of an injury to one is an injury to all. In 1774, delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies met in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. They weren't calling for independence just yet. They wanted to find a peaceful solution. They sent a petition to King George III, pleading with him to respect their rights as British citizens. But they also began to prepare for the worst, urging colonies to form militias. The king's response? He declared the colonies to be in a state of rebellion. The time for talking was over. On April 19, 1775, British troops marched from Boston to Lexington and Concord to seize a stockpile of colonial weapons. They were met by local militiamen, the Minutemen. Someone fired a shot. To this day, nobody knows for sure who, and the shot heard round the world kicked off the American Revolutionary War. The first year of the war was chaotic. The colonies still hadn't officially declared independence. Many people were on the fence. They were fighting for their rights as Englishmen, not to create a new country. But then a pamphlet called Common Sense by Thomas Paine was published. It was a runaway bestseller, and its message was simple, direct, and powerful. Why should a tiny island rule a vast continent? Monarchy is a broken system. It's time for America to break free and create a new government based on the principles of liberty and self-rule. Common Sense shifted public opinion dramatically. It made the idea of independence not just possible, but necessary and logical. So, in the hot summer of 1776, the Second Continental Congress met again in Philadelphia. A committee, which included Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin, was tasked with drafting a formal declaration. Jefferson, a brilliant writer, did most of the heavy lifting. On July 4, 1776, the Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. This document was more than just a breakup letter to King George. It was a revolutionary statement of human rights. Its immortal words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," became a promise, a creed for the new nation. It declared that governments get their power from the consent of the governed, not from a king. Of course, declaring independence is one thing, winning it is another. The brand new United States was a scrappy underdog. Its Continental Army, led by the steadfast General George Washington, was a ragtag force of farmers and merchants. They were up against the most powerful military machine in the world. The early years of the war were tough. Washington's army suffered brutal defeats and endured incredible hardship, like the freezing winter at Valley Forge. But they had a powerful cause to fight for, and Washington's leadership, his sheer refusal to give up, held the army together. The turning point came in 1777 at the Battle of Saratoga. The American victory there was huge. It wasn't just a military win, it was a diplomatic one. It convinced France, Britain's old rival, that the Americans actually had a chance. So France officially recognized the United States and entered the war as its ally, providing much-needed money, weapons, and crucially, a navy. With French help, the tide began to turn. The final major battle of the war took place at Yorktown, Virginia, in 1781. General Cornwallis and his British army were trapped on a peninsula, surrounded by Washington's army on land and the French navy at sea. With nowhere to go, Cornwallis surrendered. The war was effectively over. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, and Great Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States of America. The American Revolution was more than just a war. It was an idea brought to life. It was the first time a colony had successfully rebelled and established a republic based on the consent of the governed. The ideals of the revolution, liberty, equality, and self-government, inspired countless other movements for independence and democracy around the world, from the French Revolution to anti-colonial struggles in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. The journey wasn't perfect. The noble idea that all men are created equal didn't apply to everyone at the time. The stain of slavery and the displacement of Native Americans are deep and painful contradictions. But the principles laid out in the Declaration of Independence created a standard, a goal to strive for, that has fueled struggles for civil rights and equality in America ever since. So the next time you see an American flag, remember the incredible story behind it. It's a story of courage, sacrifice, and the revolutionary idea that ordinary people can challenge an empire and create their own destiny. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through history interesting, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'll see you next time.